Snowdrops from the Curate's Garden by Aleister Crowley. Introduction. Two philosophers of an empirical type, R. Browning and J. Christ, agree in disputing the possibility of obtaining a silk purse from the traditional sow ear. Can rapes spring from horns, or pigs from whistles? Ask the latter, while the farmer, by the mouth of his sophistical hero Caponsacchish, declines to believe the sexton who claims to have transfixed scorpions in the very act of issuing from the mouth of Madonna, and suggests what seems to us quite as improbably, that it is issued from the sexton himself, like from like, but way of the order corner. At first sight it may seem that science endorses this dogma in this fullest sense, but the truth is that if we apply the fundamental fact to man, we are led into error. For the nature of no man is simple thorn of simple grape in the incalculable tail of his ancestor must inevitably be found not only both these types, but a host of others. Further, in the complex chemical nature in the cerebral circuitations lies the profound possibility of extraordinary divergence from the normal. So many, so fickle are the combination which constitute cerebrine latchings and rest, so subtly in the thought, depend upon changes proximate or remote in the composting on of the organisms, that we must expect character which is but the statement of the sum of deep-seated habits of thought to show similar instability. The world habit may seem to invalidate such conclusions, but must we expect habit to be homogeneous? Must the religious man be also merciful? We know that it is not so. In the infinite variety of character whose formed we occasionally meet a case in which distaste of the normal vital skepticism, or some similar trait might push the individual to contrary poles of thought and action, We shall err if we fail to recognize the common basis of the audacities of piety and impiety which many manifest in the same man. As one of our great specialists has shown, it is unphilosophical, indeed contrary to provad fact, to suppose that a man like Jabez Balfour is unnecessarily insincere. His cruel frauds, his call-out skepticism are no less genuine and no more so that his narrow religious convictions, as well accuse a typewriter of deceit because it is capable of writing both the brilliant good sense of Hull Cain and vaporish outpouring of a Meredith, as well accuse a spaniel for hypocrisy because he will retrieve game and yet refuse to devour it. The outline of these truths have been allegorical sketched by R.L. Stevenson in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Outlines, for in reality there are as many sides of characters, and as there are ideas capable of influencing the individual, no doubt in all cases the one is leavened by the many, even in stark madness there is an understanding underlying essential harmony. This is of course the case, but such harmony dwells far deeper than anything which we commonly intend by character, such as an expression for violence is found in the author of the following works. It is the custom of study, even if briefly, the life of a great writer from the biographical standpoint. In this case, it is impossible to follow the usual course, for I have no wish nor blast the useful public career of the most talented artist of our day. And there can be no doubt that precision of allusion would cause his innumerable friends to recognize in the infamous backyard who penned this abomination the sanity and delicate-minded hero of their dreams. But there is at my disposal sufficient matter of non-commercial character to enable me to indicate for the purposes of the student, the circumstances in which Kay was lived, and lives. He was born about the year 1860 in Hampshire of England. His parents were of the lesser class of county magnate, which does not care to make any great show. They had enough self-respect to live the life of their choice. The boy, delicate in his young, was not able to bear the roughness of public school for long, but he passed with honors. Although Oxford, respected for his piety and learning by his professor, and I am ashamed to say, adored by certain unsavour coterie for the babyish beauty of his face, which its unfathomable eyes, its small and scarlet mouth, and the impudent cynicism of his bottomless lust, I would say, but for the peculiar inappropriateness of the epithet. In a word, he was the foremost scholar and courtesan of his year. It would be admittedly ridiculous to claim the latter not of his lives as hypocritical. Only prigs will so stigmatize the former. A voice of 20 does not render Thomas a Kempis into Greek Anapaists without genuine scholarship and quali piety. Yet he is the author of the non-Zeus hexameter's beginnings. Hail to the pack F King's lips and open American. He was who kept the hexameters in Street James. Husband, love your wives, and be not bitter against them. Короче, какие-то его стихи повторяются. Блять, и тут еще какая-то... Я не понимаю, что это написано. Это вообще не на английском. Листаем дальше. One night in Paris, some of us took him to Num 8 Rue Colbert. He was very disgusted and remarked, "My uncle might stay if he came, but I'm off." None of us saw any jokes, but I happened to call at the old gentleman's house the next day and found him suffering from gout in both thumbs. On another occasion, we walked into a house in Paris, lazily surveyed the grinning girls, snapped out on those signs de marines and made for the door. It was who painted a number in immense characters on the door of a girl he disliked. He had at one time a small studio. Two nuns came. Непереводимое слово. Thither. Что бы это, блядь, не значило. Nuns came thither begging. Opening the doors to receive them, he wittily cried, "Pass the model," in the monotone of disgust which artists so quickly learn, and banged the door. On another occasion he caused to be printed and stuck up in all the urinoirs of the Latin Quarter the following smart satirical parody on French quack advertisements, directing in against the crapulous punk, whom he also speaks of in the following pages under the pseudonym of Cell B, which I retain. I might multiply examples, but what good propose? On the other hand, he would employ his fine wit in the service of pity and charity. Many are the good and generous deeds done by him under the cover of a light practical joke of quariant whim. Still less need I speak of this side of many friends, all the world know more than I could say. His character was more than dual, however. Not only did the air of periodical vanish, the return as in the epigram of Priapus, but the devotion to literature of all kinds before many deserve first before he was 30 he had published a volume of semi-sacred verse, a notable collection of Carmania Mariana, a short and most lucid history of the metaphysical controversies which culminate in the birth of socialism, a contribution of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and some refinement of electric measure, a series of articles on microcosmos which he supposed himself to have discovered. His only failure, for he proved himself to be mistaken, and manfully recanted in a very honorable letter of the editor. A short study of heraldry, which made an immense impression on the small body of thinkers who interest themselves in his curious questions, and his revolutionary masterpiece upon the relating between comparative anatomy and the political science. In his personal life he had similar breadth of experience, of experience. He was beloved of the thieves and the prostitutes in an obscure drinking cellar in Belleville, the most dangerous quarter of Paris, not as comrade but as missionary. He was at home in the most exalted social circle, and it is a well-known fact that many persons of importance relied on his stable intuition and keen vision to resolve political difficulties which baffled their less fertile brain. Сохт, я без понятия, как это читается. Давайте спросим у Гугла. Sought after by rich and poor, which his personal beauty, yeah, he yelled to none, save a single boat captain on a steamer, whom he continued faithful until his marriage, but the devotion of his young and beautiful wife exacted too much, imposed to serve a strain upon his constitution. They had been married barely a week when he took her to the infamous club in Curate. There the dissolute officer of the army of occupation, merchant, fish porter, pimps, all the cream of Egyptian society and its dregs fathered a very Wednesday night to commit appalling orgies. He gave her to their tender mercies and saw her violated a dozen times before his eyes. In a mouth no more debauched woman walked the streets than this dainty English girl. She became a mother after innumerable adulteries on both sides committed shamelessly in each other's presence, ever in spinharies of 10 or more persons. It was during the severe physical strain which her confinement imposed upon him that he wrote the nameless novel. All this time of his marriage, about 2 years, he had been also performing miracles of piety, ordinated there years before. He rapidly gained the favor of his superior by his modesty and eloquence. He obtained a valuable private captaincy in Paris, a most suitable post, allowing him plenty of leisure for other work. During this period, a delicious volume of hymns came from his pen, and his self-sacrificing ministration to the poor were the wonder of the French capital. His evening were spent in that white and high thinking informal club which meet nightly at the restaurant Auching Rausch, whose members are so honored in the world of art. They he meet C, the brilliant but debauched sculptor, caustic of wit, so genial to his friends, and the greater painter, whose royal sense of light made his canvases into a harmonious dream. He also the sweet friends of big house, who fooled him with a glow and melody of color and thought. Where to where D and L, the one poet and philosopher, the other pained, and I fear pederast. Чё? Подожди, я что-то упустил суть. There to where D and L, the one poet and philosopher, the other painter, and I fear pederast. Okay. Twins in thought, the two were invincible in arguments as they were supreme in their respective arts. Other, I have said, a privileged listener, while D could arguments and L superb indignation expressed in varied swords of speech would drive some luckless drivelet from the room. At a time they would hold down their victim, a bird fascinated by a snake, while they pitilessly exposed his follies to the delegate crowd. Against a third, pompous and self-confident, would be led on by them, seemingly in full sympathy, to make an exhibition of himself, visible and hideous to all eyes but his own. L, his eager face like a silver moon starting from a thundercloud, his hair would pierce the very soul of a debate and kindle it with magical joy of freeze it which scorn implacable. D, with expression noble and commanding, yet sly, and if ever ready to laugh at the intricacies of his own intellect, sat next to him, his deep and wondrous eyes lit with strange light, which whirled like burnt flames of steel. He shore asunder the sophists of one, the complacencies of another. Other were feared these two. They were feared these two. There also did he meet the well-known ethics I. Fire as a boy which boy's golden locks curl about Grecian head. I the poor and supple-minded students whose lively humors and sparkling sarcasms whereas fraught upon the deep the terrible water of his polished irony. It was a pity that he drank. There the great surgeon, the true gentleman, in spite of his exaggerate respect for the memory of Queen Victoria, J. would join in which his ripe and generous wit, handsome as a good which yet spice of devil's laughter. Ну, читаю я, конечно же, как лаутер, но как она пишет, как она звучит? Laughter. Серьезно, laughter. Laughter то laughter, мне так-то похуй. Of the devil laughter lurking there, he would sit and enjoy the treasures of the conversation, adding at the proper interval his own rich quota of scholarly jest. Needless to say, so brilliance and galaxy attracted all the false lights of the time. T. The braggart, the mediocre painter, the braggart, the mediocre painter. Что это такое? Хвостун и посредственный художник. The braggart and the mediocre painter, the lastly soi distant macuerau, the marchionesses would seek admission, which was in theory denied to one, but the cutting wit of C drove him headlong as if by the cherubim from the gates of the Garden of Eden. G. The famous society painter came one night and was literally hounded out of the room by a swift and pitiless attack on the part of D and the young ethics. Bullets-headed young Cree rashly supporting him, shared the name fate and ever after sat in solitary disgrace downstairs like a whipped hound. Outside its master's door, the subject of conversation did not matter. A fool revels himself, thought he talked about of greasing gimlets in such a furious light as beats upon the chin roach not cooled any fool lives long in that light. I turned him inside out, it revealed him ever to him as leper and an outcast, and he could not stand it. In such a circle, humbling could not live. Men of high intellectual distinction passing through Paris were constant visitors at the Chien roads as guests They were treated with high honor, but woe to the best of them if some chance would let fall, let D or L to suspect he had a weak support somewhere. When this happened, nothing could save him. He was rent and cast to the carrion beasts of prey. Now often have I seen some literary or pictorial penthouse, impious and self-sufficient as he disgusts himself with a tremor of fear in the noble's artistic attire at the foolish kind of the bazaar of the Maenda. How often have I seen Dionysus or some good discover the cheat and give him over to chose high priest of dialectic D and L to be stropped and ravaged amid the gleeful shrieks of the with intoxicated crowd. But once the victim was upon the altar, once he rose from his chair, then that is silence fell, frozen with the icy contempt of the assembly. The wretch would slink down the room with a scarred grin on his face, and not until he had faced that cruel ordeal, more terrible even to Callow's fool, that an actual whipping would have been, not until the door had closed behind him would the silence break as someone exclaimed, "My God, that a worm!" and lead the conversation to some more savoury subject. On the other hand, there was B, a popular painter upon whom the whole dog pounds and one man to destroy him. But then they saw that his popular painting was not he, that he had a true heart and an honest ambition. How quickly were the sword beaten into absentness and the spears into tornadoes. As again which a face like portrayed by Rembrandt, a man of no great intellect but making no pretension hero, the Reto. How he was loved for his jolly humor, his broad smile, his inimitable stories. Yet it must not be supposed that the average man, however unsincere, had much of welcome there without intention to wound. He was yet hurt. The arrows of visit shoot over his head, and he could never feel at home. I am perhaps the one exception without ghost of talent. Then in my own profession, medicine, I had no claim whatever to the hospitality of the dogs. but being perfectly unobtrusive, un, unobtrusive, I dare say I was easy to tolerate, perhaps even of the same value as a background is to a picture. A mere patch of neutral color, yet serving to harmonize the whole, whole, все, то есть не стена, а все. Certainly nothing but my silence saved me, he remarked a few pages back about how Cain and Meredith would have caused my instant execution, but the most painful, if the least prolonged of death. Oh yeah, no society. Since men gathered together was ever so easy to approach, to seat oneself among, to slip away from, or not to be hurled in derision from their mates, midst, dreaded as they were by the charlatan. No set of men could have been more closely knit, more genial, more fraternal, united by a bond of mutual respect, even where they differed. Of mutual respect I say no, by no means to mutual admiration of. It was the sincere artistry that they adored, not the technical skill of achievement. They formed a noble and harmonious group, the like of which has perhaps never yet been seen. Of this circle, he was a honored member, perfectly at home in all societies. He endeared himself to this one by his singular versatility and charm, his sincerity and brilliance. Once they grasped the many-sided nature of his mind and operation, which took about 2 hours hard work on the part of D and L. For he dissimulated, which amusing effrontery, the real harmony of his character. They know him for a man and love him. It was at the Red Dog that I first had the pleasure of meeting him. He was then living apart from his wife, who had returned to Cairo for the sake of its vice, and they occupied a small flat in the Avenue Matignon. It was myself living not far away, and about 10 o'clock we left the dock, and he suggested that I should walk home with him. Near the place, Street Mitchell, however, he suddenly hailed a closed cab. It was a depth of winter, and motioned me to enter. I was exceedingly surprised, exceedingly surprised, for he was fond of walking and hated traveling in any kind of vehicle. He сле. Хуй его знает. Ну, давай спросим. Vehicle. That was vehicle. Okay. Repeat. I was exceedingly. I was exceedingly surprised, for he was fond of walking and hated traveling in any kind of блять, vehicle, in any kind of vehicle. Near the Pont Neuf, he stopped the cab, removed his great blue cloak and coat, an elaborated tunic trimmed with ermine, for he was an eccentric in costume to the point of monomania, and stepped outside with me, bidding the cabman no way. We stood in the shadow of a large urinoir, and he anxiously consulted his watch. Dumb the bee, he exclaimed after a few minutes. Will she trick me after all, or has my note miscarried? I was more and more astonished than embarrassed, but I dare not question him. Suddenly, however, there resounded the echo of a pitiful cry, apparently proceeding from house which stood upon the quay. A smile of pleasure changed the frown from his face. In a few moments came the sound of softly running feet upon the road, and a dishevelled woman with a face set hard like ivory dipped into the light. A movement, his strong nervous hand pressed my back. He stood upon the parapets and dived. Like a flash he was after her, and almost before I could reach the edge of the river, he was swimming steadily to the step which the unhappy girl. He bundled her into the cab, which but little assistance from me, and giving a brief excuse and a loss to the constable who ran up, we drove off home. He reviled her with a million kisses and endearment, rather embarrassing for free party, and then her eyes opened and she saw his boyish face. She had only one word: "It isn't true." Then, "Oh my God, it isn't true," and fell to murmuring his names with every accent of infinite love and tenderness. At his house my astonishment... Что за astonishment? Хуй его знает. Давайте узнаем. Удивление. Astonishment. То же самое. At his my astonishment was tenfold. Ready, the waiting for us were hot drinks of every kind, blankets toasting before a splendid fire, a bright open bed in the luxurious room. In 10 minutes he had her nude and dry and warm and happy. He dismissed me queerly. I suppose I must follow. He louder lifting her tenderly into bed, which yet another kiss. I'll tell you about it one day. So I left them. She was his mistress for more than a year, perhaps is so still. It turned out that he had spent 6 weeks driving the poor child, though only fully was her love for him, to suicide by a calculated there of abominable cruelties, above all by his refusal to return her love. The final cup was as I have described. He had foreseen all, provided for all. Such incidents are characteristics of the man. He had not, I firmly believed, even the excuse of love for her. As I have observed, the nameless novel was written during his wife's convalescence. The verse which composed the Bromo book drew due to many occasions. Some are mere exercise in matter. If he heard a new form of rhythm, as I the sailor asked her, he would compose in it, and lest his vanity should lure him into publishing one of such exercise, he chose word which would make it impossible. I obtained the MC by a simple act of burglary. Being sure that he would never consent to their publication, I had no scruple, for they might have destroyed them. It seems to me that the most versatile genius of this, perhaps of any age, is best served by exhibiting the genius event whereas at present it turns to the most incredibly loathsome forms. The portrait of the 12 disciples would be said merit by so artistic blunder as the exclusion of Judas Iscariot. And